Admiral Jack stood at the massive window of the Star Sovereign's command bridge, his golden uniform reflecting the distant starlight. His 4 arms, covered in the typical blue scales of the Empire's elite, were clasped behind his back as he studied the holographic display before him. "Show me the scan results again," he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years of Imperial service. The young officer at the scanning station, Tom, quickly pulled up the data. "Sir, the readings are unusual. The species calls themselves humans. They've achieved faster than light travel, but their method doesn't match any known approach in our database." Jack frowned. In the Empire's 10,000 years of expansion, they'd never encountered a species that developed FTL travel without following the standard progression of technological advancement. It was like finding someone who invented running before learning to walk. "What about their military capabilities?" Jack asked, moving closer to the holographic display. Tom hesitated before answering. "That's the strange part, sir. Every single one of their ships appears to be armed. We can't find any purely civilian vessels in their fleet." "Impossible," Jack muttered. "No civilized species arms their transport ships. The energy cost alone would be—" "They'd found a way around that." "Sir," Tom interrupted, then quickly apologized for the breach in protocol. "Their weapon systems are integrated into the ship designs from the ground up. It's as if they never conceived of building a ship without weapons." The Admiral's scales shifted color slightly, showing his concern. He had seen many species join the Empire, each with their own quirks and specialties. But this was different. "Show me their home world," he commanded. The hologram shifted to display a blue-green planet, surprisingly similar to many life-bearing worlds they'd encountered. But as the scan data started flowing, Jack's eyes widened. "These readings can't be right," he said. "The atmospheric composition shows traces of nuclear weapons, countless chemical agents, and are those artificial climate changes?" "All correct, sir," Tom confirmed. "From what we can gather, they've been fighting wars continuously throughout their recorded history. They've nearly destroyed themselves multiple times, but somehow always pulled back from the brink. And each time, they emerged stronger." Jack watched as the hologram displayed historical data from the human world. Cities rebuilt from ashes, not once but dozens of times. Weapons that evolved from simple chemical reactions to world-ending devices in less than 3 centuries. A species that turned every scientific discovery into a potential military advantage, not out of malice, but out of habit. "Their development pattern is completely backward," Jack observed. "Most species discover faster than light travel after achieving peace and unity. These humans, they developed it while still fighting among themselves." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Empire had always assumed that technological advancement and social harmony went hand in hand. But here was a species that had clawed its way to the stars while carrying their conflicts with them. "Sir," Tom spoke up, his voice slightly shaky. "There's one more thing. We've detected their communication networks. They have thousands of detailed plans for defending against alien invasions. They'd been preparing for contact with hostile aliens for centuries, long before they even achieved spaceflight." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. The Empire had encountered paranoid species before, but this was different. The humans hadn't just imagined conflict, they had prepared for it with terrifying thoroughness. "Send word to the Imperial Council," Jack ordered. "Mark it as highest priority. These humans, they're not like the others. They don't fear war, they expect it. They don't hope for peace, they prepare for conflict. And most importantly," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "they've been ready for us long before we knew they existed." As the message was sent, Jack continued to study the hologram of Earth. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he couldn't quite identify. It wasn't quite fear, but rather a deep, unsettling realization. The Empire had always brought civilization to primitive species, but these humans, they made him wonder if perhaps the Empire had been primitive all along, lulled into complacency by its own power. These humans had turned their greatest weakness, their constant state of conflict, into their greatest strength. And somehow, Jack knew that would change everything. Ambassador Dan walked into the United Defense Council chamber, his crystalline skin reflecting the harsh lighting. As the Empire's top diplomat, he had handled first contact with 17 different species. None had made him feel so uncomfortable. The human chamber itself was unusual. Instead of the typical grand displays of art and culture he expected from a meeting hall, this room was Spartanly practical. The walls showed real-time defensive readouts. The delegates sat behind reinforced desks. Even the air felt different, filtered and monitored by systems he couldn't quite identify. "Welcome, Ambassador," said James, the human representative. He was an older man with gray hair and the bearing of someone who had seen too much combat. "We appreciate the Empire's peaceful approach to first contact." Dan noticed how James emphasized the word peaceful. It wasn't a threat, but a reminder. "The Empire has brought prosperity to countless worlds." Dan began his usual speech. "We hope to." "Let's skip the recruitment pitch," James interrupted politely. "We've reviewed your message of peace and cooperation. But before we proceed, we believe you should understand exactly who you're dealing with." The lights dimmed. The wall behind James came to life with images that made Dan's crystalline form shudder. This was World War I. James narrated as scenes of trench warfare played out. Humans killing humans with chemical weapons, machine guns, and artillery. We learned that industrial-scale warfare was possible. The images shifted. World War II. We split the atom and learned to harvest its power for destruction. Cities vanished in flashes of light. We swore to never let it happen again. More images followed. The Cold War, proxy conflicts, guerrilla warfare, space-based weapons platforms. Each advancement in technology accompanied by an advancement in warfare. "The interesting part," James continued, his voice eerily calm, "isn't that we developed these weapons. It's that we survived using them. Each conflict taught us something new. Not just about fighting, but about surviving, about rebuilding, about getting stronger." Dan found his voice. "But surely now that you've achieved spaceflight, you've moved beyond such." James held up a hand. The images changed again, showing massive underground bunkers, orbital defense platforms, and weapon systems Dan couldn't even comprehend. Every human colony, from the first moon base to our furthest settlements, was built with defense in mind. Every civilian ship has military-grade shields and weapons. Every child learns emergency protocols before they learn to write. It's not because we want war, Ambassador. It's because we learned, through countless battles, that peace comes through preparation. The lights came back up. Dan noticed that during the presentation, several more human military officers had silently entered the room. Their uniforms displayed badges he didn't recognize, but their bearing spoke of lethal capability. "We're not trying to threaten you," James said softly. "We're warning you. The Empire has never fought a war with humans, and we'd very much like to keep it that way. We've spent thousands of years fighting ourselves, learning from each conflict, preparing for every scenario, including this one." Dan's diplomatic training kicked in. "The Empire has no intention of." 3 hours ago, James interrupted again, "we detected an Imperial warship conducting detailed scans of our defense systems. We allowed it to continue because we wanted you to see what we wanted you to see. But make no mistake, Ambassador, we know a military assessment when we see one." The room fell silent. Dan realized with growing unease that the humans weren't afraid. They weren't even impressed by the Empire's power. They were simply ready. "Take a message back to your leaders," James said, standing. "Humanity hopes for peace. We'll gladly trade, share knowledge, and become allies. But if anyone in the Empire mistakes our hope for peace as weakness..." He paused, letting the weight of history fill the silence. Remind them that we've spent our entire existence preparing for war. We're very, very good at it, and we really don't want to demonstrate why. As Dan left the chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just witnessed something unprecedented. The Empire had always brought civilization to primitive worlds. But these humans, they had forged their civilization in fire and steel, and emerged not defeated, but tempered. For the first time in Imperial history, a species wasn't asking to join the Empire. They were warning it. Commander Paul stood on the bridge of the Imperial warship Thunder's Edge, watching the small human colony through his view screen. The settlement looked primitive. Simple dome structures on a rocky moon, barely 2,000 colonists. His mandibles clicked with anticipation. "Sir," his second-in-command Bill spoke up. "Are you sure about this? The High Council hasn't authorized any military action against the humans." Paul's 6 eyes narrowed. "The Council is weak. Did you see how they let those primitives threaten us? The mighty Empire, being mourned by creatures who barely left their own planet." He gestured at the colony below. "Look at them. Basic shields. Minimal defenses. It's time someone taught them their place." Bill shifted uncomfortably. "But sir," Admiral Jack's report specifically mentioned. "Admiral Jack is a coward," Paul snapped. 20 ships against 1 colony. We'll be heroes for showing the Empire these humans are nothing special." He straightened his uniform. "Begin the attack." The first shot never reached the colony. It vanished in a flash of light halfway to the surface. Paul blinked in confusion. "What happened?" "Unknown, sir," the weapons officer reported. "Some kind of defensive screen we didn't detect." "Should we?" Alarms suddenly blared across the bridge. The tactical display lit up with dozens, then hundreds of new contacts emerging from the moon's surface. "Impossible," Paul whispered. "Our scans showed no military installations." The human colony's surface was transforming. What looked like simple habitat domes split open, revealing missile silos and energy weapons. The rocky ground itself shifted as hidden hangar doors opened, releasing squadrons of automated defense drones. "Sir," Bill shouted, "those aren't primitive weapons. They're using technology we've never seen before." The first human counterstrike took out Paul's flagship shields like they weren't even there. The second disabled its engines. The third never came, because a transmission cut through all their comm channels. "This is Dr. Mike of the Armstrong Mining Colony," a calm voice announced. "You woke up our defense grid. Please stand down and prepare to be boarded. We would prefer not to destroy your ships if unnecessary." Paul's mandibles quivered with rage. "We are the Imperial fleet. We don't surrender tow." The ship next to his vanished. Not destroyed. Vanished. Like it was simply erased from space. "That," Dr. Mike continued in the same calm voice, "was a demonstration of our phase displacement technology. Your ship is unharmed, but has been relocated to our holding facility. The crew will be treated well. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons before we relocate the rest of your fleet." Bill looked at his commander. "Sir, we should." "No," Paul screamed. "All ships, open fire. Show these primitives the power of the Empire." The next few minutes became a lesson in human military philosophy. The colony's defenses didn't just fight back. They systematically disabled each Imperial ship with surgical precision. Weapons, engines, and communications were picked off in exactly the right order to prevent any effective resistance. As Paul watched his mighty fleet being dismantled piece by piece, Dr. Mike spoke one final time. "We tried to warn your leaders," he said, almost sadly. "This colony isn't a military base. It's a mining operation. What you're seeing is our standard civilian defense grid. Every human settlement has similar protections. We've spent generations preparing for exactly this scenario." The bridge went dark as their power systems failed. Through the view screen, Paul watched helplessly as his ships were methodically captured or disabled. Not a single human had died. Not a single shot had been wasted. The entire battle felt less like a fight and more like a well-practiced procedure. As the emergency lights kicked in, Bill turned to his commander. "Sir," he said quietly, "I don't think these were warnings. They were trying to help us. They were trying to stop us from making exactly this mistake." Paul didn't answer. He was too busy watching the automated human boarding pods approach his ship, realizing too late that he hadn't started a war. He had awakened one. The Imperial High Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy. 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat around a massive table, their attention focused on the holographic display at its center. "Play the message again," ordered High Counselor Mark, his scaled skin shifting colors with stress. A hologram flickered to life, showing a simple text message in Imperial Standard. "You should have listened. Now run." "That's all they sent?" asked Counselor Anne, her crystalline form vibrating with concern. "No demands, no threats of revenge for the attack on their colony." "Nothing else," confirmed Admiral Jack, who had been summoned from the Star Sovereign. "But there's more, much more." The hologram changed to show a map of Imperial space. Thousands of red dots appeared across it, blinking steadily. "What are we looking at?" Mark demanded. "Surveillance probes," Jack explained. "Human probes. We found them hidden throughout our territory. Some have been there for years, collecting data about our defenses, studying our patrol patterns, mapping our weaknesses." The council chamber fell silent. The implications were staggering. "You mean?" Anne's voice trembled. "They were preparing for war before we even met them." "Not exactly." A new voice spoke up. Everyone turned to see Ambassador Dan entering the chamber, looking shaken. "They weren't preparing for war. They were preparing for us to start one." The hologram shifted again, showing detailed scans of human ships now moving through Imperial space. But they weren't attacking. They were simply appearing, taking position near critical infrastructure and waiting. "Every human vessel carries enough firepower to level a planet," Dan continued. "Not because they want to use it, but because they've never believed in building defenseless ships. Their entire history is based on being ready for the worst." "But how?" Mark demanded. "How did they hide all this? Our scans showed them as a primitive species." Jack laughed bitterly. "They showed us exactly what they wanted us to see. Remember those primitive colonies we detected? Each one is a fortress. That automated defense grid that captured Commander Paul's fleet, that was their minimal civilian protection system." The council watched as more human ships appeared on the map, using jump points the Empire didn't even know existed. Each vessel positioned itself near a vital Imperial installation: shipyards, fuel depots, communication relays. "They're not attacking," Anne observed. "Why aren't they attacking?" "Because this isn't about revenge," Dan said quietly. "This is about teaching us a lesson. Look at their positions. They could cripple our entire empire in hours. But instead, they're showing us they can." A junior officer rushed into the chamber, holding a datapad. "New message from Earth's United Defense Council." The hologram changed one final time, displaying a longer message. "To the Imperial High Council. We regret that our warnings were not heeded. Your commander's attack on our mining colony demonstrated that the Empire does not yet understand humanity's position on warfare. Allow us to clarify. 1. Every human settlement is defended by weapons that can erase ships from existence. 2. Every human child is trained in emergency protocols before they learn to write. 3. Every human ship carries enough firepower to end civilizations. This is not because we want war. It's because we have learned, through thousands of years of conflict, that the best way to prevent war is to make its cost unthinkable. Your ships are being returned, their crews unharmed. Consider this a practical demonstration of our philosophy. We await your response." The council chamber remained silent for a long moment. "They're giving us a choice," Jack finally said. "Learn from this, or learn it the hard way." Mark looked around the table at his fellow council members, seeing the same realization in all their faces. The Empire hadn't discovered a primitive species to civilize. They had awakened a sleeping giant that had spent its entire history preparing for this exact moment. And now they had to decide how to deal with it. The Imperial Science Academy was in chaos. Dr. Robert, the Empire's leading weapons researcher, stared at the test results with his 4 eyes wide in disbelief. "This can't be right," he muttered, checking the data again. "Run the simulation one more time." His assistant, Lisa, brought up the holographic display. They watched as the simulation played out, a human defense drone firing a simple projectile at an Imperial shield. The projectile didn't impact the shield or explode against it. It simply passed through, as if the shield wasn't there. "How?" Robert demanded. "Our shields stop everything. Energy weapons, kinetic impacts, even radiation. That's the problem, sir," Lisa explained. "We designed our shields to stop things. The humans designed weapons that ignore things." The simulation continued, showing more examples of human military technology. Each one broke the rules the Empire had followed for 10,000 years. A junior researcher burst into the lab. "Doctor, you need to see this. We finished analyzing the mining colony's defense grid." A hologram shifted to show the colony's automated systems. Robert's color shifted to pale green as he understood what he was seeing. "These aren't military systems," he whispered. "They're mining equipment repurposed for defense. They turned their industrial tools into weapons." Lisa nodded. "The phase displacement technology that made our ships vanish. It's modified from their mineral extraction equipment. They use it to safely remove valuable ores from rock. They just adapted it to remove ships from space." Robert slumped in his chair. "Show me the scans of their civilian ships." New images appeared, showing the internal systems of standard human transport vessels. Each one was a masterpiece of defensive engineering. "Look at the design philosophy," Lisa pointed out. "Every system serves multiple purposes. Life support doubles as chemical weapons defense. Cargo holds transform into missile bays. Even their emergency rescue pods carry enough firepower to cripple a cruiser." "But why?" Robert asked. "Why put so much military capability into civilian ships?" "Because," a new voice answered, "we never developed civilian ships." Everyone turned to see Dr. Mike from the Armstrong colony walking into the lab, escorted by Imperial guards. He had been invited to explain human technology as part of the peace negotiations. "In human history," Mike continued, "every ship was a potential warship. Trade vessels carried cannons. Fishing boats were converted to submarine hunters. Space was no different." He walked to the hologram, adjusting it to show more human vessel designs. "You see these cargo ships? Their hulls are designed to survive nuclear strikes. These mining vessels, they carry enough firepower to level continents, not because we want to use it, but because our history taught us to always be ready." "But the energy cost," Robert protested. "The resources needed." Mike smiled. "That's where you're thinking too conventionally. You build weapons as separate systems. We integrate them into everything we make. Our shield technology comes from studying atmospheric reentry. Our most powerful explosives were originally mining charges. Every tool is a potential weapon, and every weapon is a potential tool." He turned to face the Imperial scientists. "You're wondering why your scans didn't detect all this. The answer is simple. You were looking for dedicated military technology. We don't build dedicated military technology. We build technology that can defend itself." Robert studied the human ship designs with new understanding. "Your entire civilization is a weapon." "No," Mike corrected gently. "Our entire civilization is a shield. Every advancement we've made came from trying to protect ourselves. We didn't develop faster than light travel to explore. We developed it to have somewhere to run if Earth was attacked." The lab fell silent as the implications sank in. The Empire had spent millennia perfecting the art of war. But humans had spent millennia perfecting the art of survival. "That's why we warned you to run," Mike said softly. "Not because we wanted to fight, but because we knew that if you forced us to, we wouldn't be fighting with just our military. You'd be fighting every piece of technology we've ever created. Robert looked at the human ship designs again, finally understanding. The Empire had built weapons of war. Humanity had built a civilization of survival. The Imperial Defense Command Center hadn't slept in 3 days. General Sam stood before the massive strategic display, watching as more red dots appeared across Imperial space. Each dot represented a human ship, positioned near something vital to the Empire's survival. "Report," he ordered, his scaled hands gripping the command rail. Colonel Tim looked up from his station, dark circles under all 6 of his eyes. "Sir, they're still appearing, using jump points we never knew existed. Our early warning systems can't track them." "How many now?" "Over 10,000 ships, but..." Tim hesitated. "They're just sitting there. Not moving, not attacking, just watching." Sam studied the display. Human vessels hung silent near power plants, shipyards, food production facilities, and trade routes. They hadn't fired a single shot. They didn't need to. "Another message from their fleet," announced Communications Officer Pete. The message was simple: your move. Sam felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The humans weren't fighting a war. They were conducting an experiment in psychological warfare on a galactic scale. "Status of civilian populations?" he asked. "Panic is spreading," reported Intelligence Officer Matt. "Our citizens have realized that every critical system in the Empire is under human observation. Food shipments are being hoarded. Trade has almost stopped. Nobody wants to travel near human ships." A new alert flashed on the main screen. Sam's heart nearly stopped. "What is that?" he demanded. "New human vessels, sir," Tim replied. "They just appeared inside our capital system." There, he swallowed hard. "They're parked next to our planetary shield generators." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the message. The humans could shut down the Empire's capital world defenses at any moment. But they weren't doing it. They were just making sure everyone knew they could. "Sir," Matt spoke up again, reports coming in from across the Empire. "Civil unrest is spreading. People are demanding the Council surrender." "Surrender?" Sam turned, shocked. "To an enemy that hasn't fired a shot." "That's just it, sir," Matt explained. "The public isn't seeing them as an enemy anymore. They're seeing them as an unstoppable force of nature. Something you don't fight. You just get out of its way." Another officer rushed in with a datapad. "General, you need to see this. We just decoded their ship communications." Sam grabbed the pad, reading quickly. His scales paled. "These aren't military communications," he whispered. "These are repair schedules, maintenance logs, crew rotation plans." "Yes, sir," the officer confirmed. "They're settling in, making themselves comfortable, like they're planning to stay there until we break," Sam finished. The strategic display updated again. More human ships appearing, more critical systems under observation. The Empire's mighty military, paralyzed not by force, but by the sheer audacity of human strategy. "Sir," Tim called out. "Message from the Council. They're asking for options." Sam laughed bitterly. "Options? The humans have showed us our options. They've proven they can appear anywhere, at any time. Their weapons ignore our best defenses. Their civilian ships outgun our warships. And now they're showing us they can stand guard over everything we need to survive." He walked to the center of the room, looking at each officer in turn. "We're not losing a war," he said quietly. "We're being taught a lesson. The humans knew we wouldn't believe their warnings, so they decided to demonstrate. They're not trying to defeat us. They're trying to educate us." The room was silent as the truth sank in. The Empire had started this thinking they were the teachers, coming to civilize a primitive species. Instead, they had become the students. "Send word to the Council," Sam ordered. "Tell them we have one option left. Learn the lesson the humans are teaching us, before they need to make the lesson any clearer. As he spoke, the strategic display updated one final time. A single human ship had appeared directly above the Imperial Palace. Its message was clear. Class was in session, and humanity was tired of repeating itself. The Imperial Palace's Grand Hall had never been so quiet. High Counselor Mark stood before the assembled leaders of both the Empire and humanity, his scales shifting between colors as he chose his words carefully. "We have gathered here today," he began, "to sign not just a peace treaty, but to acknowledge a fundamental change in how the Empire views the galaxy." The human delegation sat calmly on one side of the hall. They wore simple diplomatic uniforms, but everyone present knew that their ships still watched over every vital Imperial installation. James, the human representative from their first meeting, stepped forward. "The Empire has existed for 10,000 years," he said, "bringing civilization to countless worlds. Today, we hope to bring something to you: understanding." Admiral Jack, who had first discovered humanity, spoke next. "When we found Earth, we thought we were finding another primitive species to civilize. Instead, we found a mirror showing us our own primitive assumptions." The hall's massive screens displayed images from the past month. Human ships appearing across Imperial space, their quiet vigil bringing the mighty Empire to a standstill without firing a single shot. "But why?" a young Imperial noble called out. "Why not just destroy us when you had the chance?" James smiled. "Because destruction was never our goal. Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy or destroy potential rivals. We simply want what we've always wanted: to survive." Dr. Mike from the Armstrong colony stepped forward, holding up a small device. "This is why we're different," he said. "This simple tool can either power a hospital or disable a battleship. Every piece of human technology serves multiple purposes because we learned early in our history that everything can be either a tool or a weapon. The choice is in how you use it." Mark raised his hand, and servants brought forward an ancient Imperial artifact: the Book of Civilizations, where the Empire recorded the species they had uplifted. "For the first time in Imperial history," Mark announced, "we will not be recording a species that we civilized. Instead, we will record the species that taught us the true meaning of civilization." He opened the book to a new page and began to write. "Humanity. The species that showed us that true civilization isn't about technological advancement or military might. It's about survival, adaptation, and the wisdom to use power wisely." James walked to the book and added his own words. "The human race offers this lesson to the Empire. The most powerful weapon is the one you never have to use. The strongest civilization is the one that prepares for the worst while working for the best." Throughout the hall, screens showed human ships across Imperial space powering down their weapons. Not leaving, just standing down. The message was clear: trust, but verify. "The treaty we signed today," Mark continued, "isn't just about peace between our peoples. It's about learning from each other. The Empire will learn from humanity's preparedness and innovation, and perhaps humanity can learn from our experiences in bringing peoples together." As the leaders signed the treaty, Admiral Jack turned to James. "You know," he said quietly, "when you first warned us to run, we thought you were threatening us. Now I understand. You were trying to save us from making a terrible mistake." James nodded. "Sometimes the greatest victory is preventing a war before it begins. That's what we've been practicing for all our history." The ceremony concluded with an unprecedented event: the Empire formally requesting to learn from humanity, rather than the other way around. As the delegates filed out of the hall, Dr. Mike approached Mark. "Your Empire has stood for 10,000 years," he said, "but you've never faced a real challenge. You've never had to fight for survival. We have. Every human advancement, every innovation, came from our drive to survive. Not to conquer, not to rule, just to live another day." Mark looked out at the stars through the hall's massive windows. "And now, what will humanity do now?" Mike smiled. "What we've always done. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and make sure that anyone who thinks about starting a war realizes that the cost would be too high to bear. In the sky above, human and Imperial ships began joint patrol missions. Two civilizations, each learning from the other, creating something new. An era where peace came not through ignorance of war, but through the wisdom to prevent it.